Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Raising the New Earth podcast. I'm here with Brooke. Hey, Brooke.
Hello, Noah.
Today we thought it would be a good idea for us to kind of talk about the bioterrain and to differentiate between the germ theory versus the terrain theory, which were led by French scientists Pasteur and Bechamp. And we thought it's going to be a great episode to just kind of like cover what has started in the late 1800s as this debate in the academia um, between those two French scientists that argued over germ theory versus terrain theory. And you've probably heard these arguments surface during the recent pandemic. So, what we find with these two theories that we're going to cover together is that Bechamp, in general, Bechamp recognized that you could take identically genetic twins and put them in two different environments, and they would get two completely different diseases. And he followed these twin studies and spoke about how we are not born with a vulnerability, but we develop vulnerability. And that vulnerability of disease is going to be within the environment that we coexist. And he then proved that when exposing the families with nearly the same genetics across the board, some would get sick and others would not, if within the terrain that made the whole difference. And we have to remember that back then they were battling with tuberculosis in the late 1800s and cholera. And it just makes us think that, you know, the largest economic driver in the economies of Western worlds have become the healthcare. So we have to look at the other side of it with Louis Pasteur that argued that everybody is healthy, but some people can be attacked by these germs and die. And he was specifically speaking about the cholera and the tuberculosis. Unfortunately, in the end, Pasteur is the one that won the game because some said that he was just a better he was a better statesman and a better debater. So, Brooke, in your own life, where do you see these two battles of push and pull, and where do you see this as a mother deciding whether to give your child, you know, a pharmacotherapy or stick it with natural medicine?
I like that question, how you posed it, kind of coming back to me as a mother. But I think that I think like backing up, like and looking at where, when kind of you had these two different sides, and this was really, a big debate then at that point. You had in America like a huge push to moving into the bigger cities. The sanitation was not, up to par. So you did have a lot of people getting sick, and, for understandable reasons, by pasteurizing something, which is where we get the name pasteurized from Louis Pasteur, but by this idea of these germs that they're bad and that if we just kill them, then they can't kill us. It's understandable that maybe took a foothold a little bit more so than like if you just keep your terrain healthy. And there's so much too that we just didn't know about the body, or perhaps we did. The more that I kind of discover how much we have known and how deep our knowledge has been from ancient traditions, I think it's just that maybe we were starting to forget how much we knew about the body. But so I guess like to just back up before I answer your question, it's like it's understandable, and in some ways we see what fear can do in general. And so it makes a lot of sense to where kind of the germ theory kind of took hold of people and within the medical community at large. I think that, with myself, even before I became a mother, just looking more holistically at health. I wasn't specifically looking through the angle of germ versus terrain theory, but the more that I learn about the body overall, just in how our genetics, yes, they play a role, but it's more about our lifestyle and how we surround our genes, like what, that decides what genes turn on and what genes turn off. And then also looking at like our microbiome, and that we have bacteria that we need, and it's extremely beneficial. So, and then also just, even with what we've been through the past few years, we can see that some people are much more susceptible to germs than others. And I still think we fail to kind of, we let our fear drive where we look at things, when really what we may want to be studying a little bit more is, why is it? Like, of course, we know that the elderly are more susceptible to things, but I've actually been reading Forever Young by Dr. Mark Hyman. And I just love how he kind of breaks everything down, but essentially that even aging can be thought of as a disease, and that there's certain things that we can do to keep ourselves healthy, to keep our terrain healthy, so that when these germs bombard us, our bodies have what they need to stay in balance. Because I don't even want to say fight back, because I think it really comes back to, like, we've got to learn how to live in harmony. But these viruses and bacteria, they're all around us. So what can we do to make our terrain as healthy as we can, so our body is able to not just completely get whacked out of balance, when something comes. So all that to say, with me being a mother, like, I certainly, and I'll give an example. Like, my little girl has been battling a cold this past week, and she had like a little stomach virus before that. And so I think her immune system's really down, and we happen to be recording this on Halloween. And so, I've tried to be like within balance. Like, I don't want to necessarily withhold things from her, but I want her to understand why we choose other foods over others. But like, I'm kind of feeling myself reeling it in even more, because I'm trying to emphasize to her that, by feeding ourselves all this sugar, it's not giving our bodies what it needs to fight back, and that we need to, I didn't use the word terrain, but that's essentially what we're doing. We need to make the terrain of our bodies able to handle, the sicknesses and the illnesses that are going to inevitably come our way. So, I am trying my best to instill in my daughter this idea that, we want to keep our bodies in a state that allows them to be healed, and to not fear germs. And yes, some general hand washing and basic principles of hygiene can go a long way in just kind of keeping that balance. But I never really want to instill the idea, nor do I want to get in this idea that, we've got to just fight these bugs and that, like, it's just more about keeping our bodies healthy and in balance.
Right.
But yeah, what are your thoughts on that, and with your kids?
So it was interesting to learn that back in the 40s and 50s, when we, because of Pasteur winning the debate, we started to see all germs as pathogens. And we didn't know that 90% of the work done in the human body was actually being done by a bacterium. So we started giving kids back in the 40s and 50s injection of penicillin for anything and everything, from a sore throat to a cough to sinus to everything, to a tummy ache. And so I think that as this started to happen, we started to see weaker and weaker elements within the food system that led to the need of antibiotics for things like plants and humans. And I have developed, I recently took a genetic test, and as a girl, I suffered from celiac. However, there's no genetic correspondence to my heritage of having any celiac disease. So, and I knew that by being given antibiotics, that weakens your mitochondria and it weakens the gut. And so I did ask my mom if she has ever given me antibiotics as a child. And she said, yes, that was the protocol. When you grew up, we knew that when you were sick, we give you antibiotics. And so I had to make the connection because of the heavy dosages of antibiotics. I have developed a weaker gut bacteria and I have developed consequently the celiac disease. So I think as parents, what you're saying is absolutely true. If we focus on making sure that the terrain of our children is mostly healthy, and we see and we know also mood wise that the serotonin resides within the gut, there's a lot of gut and brain connection. And if we make that space a happier space with whole foods, with real food, and minimize the processed food, that Halloween candy that our child will, you know, will want to seek because everybody else is doing it, will be okay, because this is, like we talked about before, this is the once in a while, this is the occasional food.
Exactly.
Those artificial dyes and natural, which are not at all natural flavors, have no room in the household. This is not food. This is really weakening the child's immune system and gut bacteria. But that is when they can tolerate it in times like that.
Right. Yes. Yes. Because yeah, of all of the other nutritious food that they're eating. Yeah. Well, and your point about the antibiotics, I think it speaks also to like it seems like we don't have a lot of room for nuance within the medical system where, yes, antibiotics can certainly be life-saving. And like, thank goodness penicillin came around because, if you have a life-threatening bacterial infection, like it'll knock it out like that. However, too much of a good thing is not a better thing. It's actually not a good thing at all. And so what we're seeing now is like what is happening with the overuse of antibiotics, both in, humans and then also in animals with all of the factory farming. And, you're now seeing a lot of the more antibiotic resistance and like you were saying, just the destroying of the gut lining from, not understanding also that if you're going to give a round of antibiotics that, it may be good to support it with some probiotics or something that's going to help rebuild the gut. So, and I think that like brings it back to this idea of like, is it terrain theory or is it, germ theory? Which one is going to win? And, you see that same thing of like, it has to be either or. And, I think that there's room for both, that like, yes, there are bad bacteria that can, cause a lot of havoc. However, we can take a two-pronged approach to doing this. And so, I think a lot of it is that like just the way our medical and especially like our public health system is set up, it's like it tends to only be able to look at things from like a large population and not take like the individual, that what is best for an entire population isn't necessarily meant to be individualized medicine. It's just kind of a more recommendation. And I feel like we've taken those broad recommendations or broad public health kind of ideas and tried to drive them into an individual approach. And I just, for many reasons, that's not going to work.
I couldn't agree more. Yeah, I mean, we know that chronic disease management is the most lucrative of industries ever created in the United States. The United States spends about $3.8 trillion a year, which dwarfs the military budget of 680 billion. And some say, okay, so if we don't have sick people in our society, this will collapse, right? The economy, the US economy will collapse. That is not true. I mean, we can create a new context of understanding of the two driving forces within nature, which is biodiversity and adaptation. So if we are to create companies, corporations, a new health system, truly health system, not sick system, and technologies that embrace that biomimicry, and then the ownership of knowledge and data, what is going to be then? You're going to see a monopoly, an advantage of really healthy people taking control over their lives. And the studies that are showing that in the last 20 years, the United States physicians have consistently prescribing 7.7 billion pounds of antibiotics to their patients a year, 7.7 billion pounds of antibiotics a year to their patients. So we came to understanding that 83 to 86% of our population is getting an antibiotic every single year. This is us undermining the ability of our microbial diversity, all at the same time through the pressures of the physicians that really don't have the answer to why this chronic illness happens. The truth of the matter is physicians don't sit with their clients like health coaches or other nutritionists sit, or chiropractors even sit with a client trying to figure out the root cause. Why does a child scratches his ear? Maybe he doesn't need antibiotics. Have you asked him about the gut bacteria? Have you looked into his patterns, behavioral patterns, their mental body? What are they going through right now in their life? What sort of trauma they're carrying? There's a lot of questions to ask a patient other than just looking and attacking that singular thing. I worked with a client over in Australia, and she was giving antibiotics for years to battle her severe eczema in her eye, to a point where she couldn't open her eyes. There was white pus around her eye. She has given up on the allopathic system. She was referred to me. And with a change of nutrition, with taking out certain foods to starve the pathogen that was inside her gut, we were able to heal her within 20 days. Something that antibiotics weren't able to, because it decreases your immune system. It can no longer battle that same thing. And so you give a stronger strain of antibiotics just to come to a dead end. So this is not the answer. And understand that a lot of physicians are not equipped to deal with chronic illness. And the answer is that band-aid of pharmacotherapy. Here is what you do. Good luck. It is not the answer. It shouldn't be the answer. And what I'm hoping is that our services as healthcare professionals and practitioners will be able to somehow be covered under the umbrella of health insurance, because I notice that many people cannot afford or can't bring themselves to make that a priority of, giving $100 or $200 to see a private practitioner, even if that will solve their issue.
Yeah. It's like, it's unfortunate that our system is set up in that way. And it's also unfortunate that, as being a part of that system, it's hard to break away from it because the way the insurance is set up, and that, a lot of these more functional and holistic practices are not covered through insurance. However, I would like to think, or, this is where I hope we're getting to, is that just as you were saying, like, the lady who her eczema was so bad, it's like she got to a point where she was so desperate, and it was so clear that the route she was going down with allopathic medicine was not getting her anywhere, that like it takes, kind of that rock bottom to recognize that you've got to go in a different direction. And I think the light within that is knowing that, like, the more people kind of move down this cliff, essentially, like to where, there's no end in sight, that they do start to realize that there's got to be a change. And then they themselves, because I mean, that's what I think is so powerful. I know we've talked about this before, but so many of us that are in like the holistic health field, we've had our own, run in with illness, or, something that just wasn't working for us within kind of modern allopathic medicine. And it was that recognition that has driven our passion to talk more about these holistic approaches and looking at things from like a completely different paradigm. So, and I love the book, like The Tipping Point by Malcolm Gladwell, but I think that that's what it is. There's going to be a tipping point where so many people are, and I think we're getting there, because I talk to a lot of relatives who are very in the, more traditional type medicine route. They've kind of thought what I do and talk about is a little bit, out there. But they're getting very frustrated with the medical system. Like it's overburdened, because there's so many people with chronic illnesses, and because our system is not set up to be able to deal with chronic illnesses. So I think that, once enough people really start to look in another direction, see that it heals them, you're going to see a big shift towards this. And I mean, this is at least my hope. Like, maybe it's a pipe dream, but I think that it just seems to me like there's no other way, because we're just getting sicker and sicker from a general population, and we don't have a healthcare system that's set up to heal people. So that is the light at this,
Yeah.
in kind of the darkness of what the medical system is. But all that to say, again, like, when we go back to like this idea of germ theory versus terrain theory, like we can still, we have the most acute medical care. I mean, going back to, if you have some bacterial infection that is just, eating your body, or you got something, like, you can go to the hospital and get a heavy dose of antibiotics and you won't die. And that's fantastic. Right. However, when you're looking at these chronic conditions, and even if you have that, like, and you get that heavy dose of antibiotics, at some point you're going to have to look at your entire terrain, because your body is an ecosystem. And so when we can make that paradigm switch as a whole, then I'm hoping we can see it through both angles. Like, yes, antibiotics can have their, use, and, perhaps even, other things like vaccines, and, but that there's got to be a looking out at the individual actual terrain within their microbiome, within their entire cellular structure.
I agree. And I think that the concept of nutrition needs to be shaken up, right? It can't be so confusing. And again, we say, unless you have a chronic illness that where you need to omit certain foods and bring in certain supplements, it's really about focusing on whole foods. And something that I like about quantum medicine, for example, and you talk about the bioterrain, and part of the bioterrain to me is also the emotional aspect of it. So, for example, we know that one of the major causes of psychosomatic medicine is lack of forgiveness. That is then translated into a question like, where do I let go, or how is my letting go? And the large intestine, for example, is the seat of the emotions and the host of the important reservoir of different neurotransmitters, which is the key organ related to the moving on and forgiveness. So gut, being the emotional brain, needs to be looked at not just from a place of let me nuke that virus, that bacteria, and move on. There's other, because if this was the case, then every chemotherapy in the world would work. And it doesn't work 100% of the time to 100% of the population. And then the question is why? Because we are very layered human beings. We have traumas that are restored within our organs. Ayurvedic medicine talks about chakra medicine, Taoist medicine talks about it, quantum medicine mentions it. What else is going on beside the physical body? And we talked about before as a downward causation from the mental body. What is it that we're manifesting in our body? What can't we let go of? So that if someone does decide to go the allopathic route with cancer, and this is an individual decision, then it can potentially be more effective, because you have done the work around the letting go, the forgiveness, the whatever emotional abuse you're holding on to. So we can't forget it. And if a child has a stomach ache, I'm not in a hurry to give my child anything, because the first question is, what do you need from me? How do you feel? What happened at school today that you may want to talk about? And knowing your child and taking that time to sit down with your child, or even your spouse, whoever is, closest to you, is really imperative to understanding if the child does need an exterior supplement or medicine, or the child needs a hug and talking over their emotions. I know that when, the way that I grew up in my childhood, I'm not going to expand on that, it was a very intense way of upbringing. And I know that I held my emotions in the stomach. So it's not a coincidence that I ended up in the hospital a few times a week at the ER for the doctor to say she has nothing. I stored all the emotions of being scared and being afraid, the inability to speak up from my thymus gland, from my, then developed into a thyroid, Hashimoto thyroiditis. It is all connected. It, Again, it doesn't have to be complicated for, the average person who listens to this podcast, but we are encouraging you to look beyond the symptomatic manifestation of the body right here, right now. You may be able to track it back to, okay, so maybe he's afraid or she's afraid. They're just starting to go to school, so they need me more. And so they say their stomach hurts or the head hurts. Maybe they need a day with mommy or daddy. Maybe they need a day to feel really secure and close and loved. And I'm saying that because we've been through that situation with our own kids. So take the
Yeah.
time. I know it's not easy because we are working mothers. We're always in a hurry, la 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 la. But take that moment with your child. He or she may not be so vulnerable when they grow up. So these are the precious moments you want to pay attention to.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's just such an important skill to have as well. And I think even as adults, we often don't have it. And if we learned it as children, it would just become so much a part of us. But to really be able to be in touch with what emotions you are feeling. So by encouraging your child to kind of like, okay, what do you need? What are you feeling? Where what happened in school today? Or maybe, they're starting to identify, well, I felt sad because so-and-so said this, or I felt fear, whatever it is. And, I think that maybe when we were growing up and, and I know you had even, a completely different childhood than I did. And, a whole level of different traumas. But I think in general, just from most, at least Western populations, there's kind of this idea of like you don't want to be soft, you got to kind of harden yourself for the world.
Right.
And the more that I like, with what you were saying, with just how emotions can, that energy is there, whether or not you can suppress it all you want, but it's still there, it lives there. And it's always going to be there until you actually deal with it and are able to release it. And so, I would argue that like children that will be able to identify their emotions and handle their emotions and work through them and give themselves what they need because they were given what they needed through their parents, that those actually will be the strong adults that they are the ones who can help carry everyone else, and that they're not kind of, walking around with these heavy figurative backpacks on their back of all of these suppressed emotions. And so, I feel like that's another place where we're maybe getting there as a society, that we're recognizing the emotional needs of our children. But I just don't think it was necessarily there when we were growing up.
Yeah.
To have that. Yeah.
I agree. And I think the reminder of us remembering that we can't diminish the value of our entire ecosystem concept. We are everything, right? Dr. Amit Goswami talks about 5 different bodies. We do. And the chakra medicine talks about 7 energy centers. So there is an ecosystem beyond just the physicality. And so, in regards to Halloween that's coming up actually today, it's that forgiveness, it's that allowance, it's that grace with the monitoring of, does my child, like, what approach do you take? I know some parents take the approach of, yeah, I'm going to have my children eat all the candies they have gathered until they vomit, and then they'll learn not to eat that amount anymore. I heard that before. That's not my approach. My approach is choose 5 or 10 that you absolutely love, and the rest we're going to donate. We donate to the soldiers, but some schools take it back and they do it for you. Choose 10 that you love. And honestly, of course, they're going to have more than 10, and that is okay. But I'm going to make sure that they have a really good dinner before they go out and ask for, trick or treat. So I want to make sure that that they are full with the right food so that they may not have room, or even I would add, they would have cushion to push some of those, crazy sweets out. So that is my tactics. I allow them to have 10, we donate the rest, and I make sure that they have dinner before they go out trick-or-treating.
Yeah. I love that. I think that's super balanced, and I'm doing similar. This is really the first year. Like last year, she still didn't really get it, and to be honest, she did have some candy, but then I just took the rest and pitched it. But yeah, I'm going to do similar. I wanted her to eat a whole smoothie for lunch. That's what I was just doing because I was like, you've got to have, she went to preschool this morning. Of course, they got treats there. She's going to get more treats later. She wanted a treat right then. So it was like, eat your smoothie, and then you can have one, and, you're going to have a little bit more tonight. And then I did tell her for the first time today, I said, you're going to have a lot more. We're going to pick some that you can, eat a little bit throughout the week. But I was like, but we're not keeping it all. We're going to donate it. And I tried to also make it a little bit of a lesson of like, we're going to give it to somebody else to make them happy, because, so that, yeah. And I know there's like homeless shelters. I haven't looked into the specific one, but that's what I'm planning to do, is like either homeless shelters, or if I can find like vets, or, someone will take the candy. But yeah, I think, everybody has their different approaches. I know some people do like a switch where it comes and you get a toy with, but I don't know, to me, like, I know I don't want her to feel like I'm just keeping it 0 off limits. Like we've talked about, it's more about them learning like the foods that we eat sometimes, and that we really need to focus more on the good foods, and then we can have treats every once in a while. But yeah, so yeah, I think everybody has to kind of find what feels right for their family. But yeah.
And we are known as the house that gives out clementines with spooky faces on it.
Yeah.
And the first year that we did that, our son was really embarrassed. He's like, why are you giving out clementines? But then we noticed that the kids were so excited to get a clementine.
Oh, yeah.
And so now we make the kids paint those, a little bit, with Sharpie, like a little scary face on the little clementine. And this year, just to demonstrate like what it is, this household is the yin and yang completely. Like the first year, my husband just bought the big chocolate candy. So this is where he comes from. And I'm like, no candy. So this year, as a compromise, we're doing clementines and lollipops. So the mixture of both. Whoever wants clementine could get a clementine, want a lollipop.
Right.
That's our household.
Yeah. I love that. That's great. Yeah. Meanwhile, I just went and bought like the fun size candy. I will say we don't get many trick-or-treaters because we're not really in a neighborhood. So that's why I didn't get much. I actually I don't plan to take her out for that long. So I'm kind of like, I might recycle some of that candy and we get trick-or-treaters.
Do it.
That candy. If we run out, which I don't think we will. We had like 4 trick-or-treaters last year. So
yeah. No, we get quite a few.
I bet. Yeah, if you're in a neighborhood with like all the kids. Yeah. But I love the clementine. And I think that's really, I bet they will remember that. It was like a story from growing up that they, for Halloween, what they gave out was clementines.
Yeah. And we have a neighbor that gives out bubbles and balloons.
Oh, perfect. Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And a neighbor that gives stickers. Yeah.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be candy if you're not comfortable with that. Like, do what you want.
I think that's great. Yeah.
Beautiful. So I think we covered the majority of what we wanted to talk about and kind of circled back
Mhm.
to Halloween, which is tonight. Anything you'd like to add?
No, I think, yeah, I just, yeah, to all of our listeners, I would just encourage you to, think through your terrain, like that, and just how, from an individual level, you're allowing your ecosystem of your body to support you.
Beautifully said. So until next time, see you guys later. Bye.
Bye.